Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Gaming with Scott. We are here on the floor of WYC 10. All kinds of power.
That crowd goes wild.
That crowd goes wild. I am here with Josh Jackson.
What up?
I am here with John Garlic.
Howdy, howdy.
I am here with Jade Duguay. And I am here with Pete from Imagining Games.
Very nice. Thanks.
Ooh. Right? That was
Pete Petrusha. I like how you
Pete
saved
Petrusha.
yourself there, too.
I did. I went, Pete.
You're like,
I'm not going to back into that one.
Here.
I'm going to go right. It's Pete. I went, Pete probably doesn't want me to massacre his last name.
See, people do the same thing with my last name.
Ta-da! I
My
did that
whole
too.
life, Pete Petrushka.
Pete
it's-
Petrushka.
People just want me to be more Russian or something.
Yeah, Russian, Polish, something.
Which is funny because, people can't hear my ethnicity. But, I obviously am Korean, so I don't look Russian at all.
Right.
So my father was adopted. So we have a Ukrainian name, and he doesn't even look Russian or Ukrainian.
Nice.
So it really does throw people.
Nice. Okay. So, yeah, I did. I swerved. I know exactly where I'm not going, and that's how that worked here. So we are here on the floor in our startup corner on the Gaming with Scott corner is what I'm going to start calling it. This is our second year. We're recording live from the stage of WYC 10. This is the 10th anniversary, and we are very pleased to be starting out with Pete. Dream Chaser.
You tried it again.
I
He's
did.
like,
I did.
stop.
I was
gotta
like, I
stop.
can't do that. I'm not going there yet. Pete, tell us a little about you. Tell us a little bit about what you made and what we're going to be playing on our next episode because we'll take a break.
All right, great. So, I'm probably exciting. There's probably something I could say, but we're going to skip right to the game because that's what I'm passionate about. Right? So, the big thing is, like probably everyone else at this table, you play for a long time. You play a lot of different games. You can build a wealth of knowledge. And if you're passionate like I am, you just want to give back. You want to leave it better. It's a little bit of legacy. I don't know if that's just a human thing that we all have legacy for the things that we care about, but you want to contribute and you want to leave it a little bit better than what was put in before you. And with Dream Chaser, it does a handful of things that I think help kind of reinvigorate role-playing games today because we have a lot of new troubles because times are changing.
Amen.
People are busier. Everyone's got too much stimulus. Nobody's bored anymore, right? Who reads? There's just lots of things that we're trying to compete with. How do you get new people into a hobby that's got like a learning curve that might be read 200 pages, 300 pages? It's hard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the quick pitch on Dream Chaser is that it's a game that adapts to you. It finds what a group of people are interested in, your players at a table, and it zeroes in on those interests and helps you build a story around it. So not only is it maybe a universal game, or some people like the term generic, it does something special. It's a goal-oriented game. I think every role-playing game is, but games sell themselves on setting and not goal, and I think goal is very precise.
Very nice.
Because I've certainly played, or at least purchased, a lot of games in the past. And several of the times I've
Spent a
ended
lot of money. No money left.
Sometimes I end up with a book in my hand, and I think, okay, well, this is an amazing setting, but there's no plot or
Substance.
characters to go along with it.
Yeah.
Or you end up with this amazing setting that has tons of there's 43 planets in this system and there's a race on every one of them, and I've got a 600-page tome that I have to go through to find the this Martian versus that Venetian versus I'm thinking Rocket Age
We're
was
playing
a
GURPS?
beautiful.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, well,
And what does that do to a game master, especially a new one, right? That paralyzes them.
yeah, good luck.
Because they go, okay. I don't know about the rest of you, but, I played D&D mostly when I started. My first game was Shadowrun Second Ed, so I don't know how I'm still here.
Nice.
That was my first game. I was in 5th grade, so I had no idea what half the math in the game actually meant because I
Nice.
literally did not know how to
Throw
do algebra
more
yet.
dice.
Oh,
Throw
you-
more dice.
but-
Yeah, all you had was a bucket of 6-siders and you were ready to go.
So, God, what did you say? Oh, yeah, because too many games today. The setting is so much that you become this game master who's like, I don't know which one of my players is going to call me out if I say this wrong. What were the two factions here that are facing each other? What is their problem yet? What are the main characters? Some people embrace it, and then they read every little bit of it, and they live in that moment, which is awesome. But obviously not everyone can do that, with especially every setting.
And it doesn't necessarily survive hitting the table either.
Yeah, the players can break it or run you away from whatever you were looking at.
We're here to break your game. That's it? Yes. 3 hours. We're going to pay our money. I'm going to break your game. Awesome.
Or also you get situations where you might have a perfectly a perfectly viable setting, but the characters, you might end up with characters of opposing factions or different political groups that will be at odds at the table without even, if
Without
people
even
just
knowing it.
are presented with a list, they won't know that, like,
I hate you.
yeah.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah,
let's
sorry,
go.
we hate each other now.
Do you guys, when I think of these, names just jump at me. Like, people love or they hate Legend of the Five Rings. Totally, there's not people in the middle usually, unless they're the
No,
casual
nobody's in the
one-shotter.
middle.
But
No.
people either love it
Yep.
because you got to embrace the culture and you have to like put your feet in the shoes of like, what does a samurai care about? Honor. Everything is honor and respect. And if that's not your game, if you're like, hey, I really just don't want that to be the forefront, then it's not your game.
I don't want to RP for
Shadowrun.
2 hours. I don't want to RP for 2 hours for a tea ceremony.
Yeah,
Which is the right
Yeah.
way to look about it.
You need to ask for 3 times to see the emperor and be denied 3 times before you can actually be let in. If you don't want to roleplay that, get out.
Yeah.
True statement. It's about
and-
the story.
Or like, there are also plenty of games that sort of have a very strong built-in system that may or may not support what they're about.
Oh, for sure,
in my
yeah.
experience, it is possible. For example, Shadowrun. It is possible to just make a bad Shadowrun character.
Yeah.
Like, where if you're just not good at anything, then you'll have a frustrating time.
You can make a very
Yeah.
broad character, and that's a game of specialties, right?
Yeah, that's
Right.
that's one shot
Yeah.
pony, one trick pony game, and you're over here going, I'm a little good at everything. Then you're not really good at anything.
Then why are you on this job?
Yeah.
Because we need experts.
Yeah, because we need somebody for this one.
You're the guy
thing.
who pays us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
The one system, that's a good example of. There's no class or level based, but there's absolutely jobs. And if you just rush in and you're like, well, I'm going to be a hacker, wizard, street samurai, punchy
Hybrid.
face guy, and,
Yeah.
also do all the talking, then, then you're going to
gonna
have
be a long day.
You're going to have a hard time making it work. So
You also made a good point too, and you're going to step on other people's shoes, right? You're going to steal their
absolutely,
shine
yeah.
because people generally make unless you have a 2 or 3 player game, which then I guess you have to be hybrids, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it more realistic. But I don't know what it is about Shadowrun. It's always a 6 or 8 player game, and it never should be. It just there's always too many people to play.
Yeah, and it's all, we need to get through this door. Not it. Oh, he's the door guy. Door guy, get up here. All right, we're good. We're through the door. Now we move on.
And I mean, like, Mr. Johnson always betrays you because otherwise there's no
What?
because otherwise there's no plot after you
Hashtag
pull off the
spoilers.
job.
Jeez, John.
John,
and-
you're ruining the whole spoilers.
Well, I mean,
for those of you
the
that didn't-
entire the only way to get all of these disparate characters who might be completely politically scattered all over the place is to have common cause, and revenge is the easiest one when you don't get paid.
Money. Oh,
Way
money
off.
is the common cause,
Yeah.
John.
Sam-
and then revenge. You're getting ahead.
Samsonite way off. No,
Yeah,
just
you're
saying.
telling the
Jade,
story.
do you have any games that are like just setting galore, like just thick?
So I had never played an RPG before joining these guys. So what?
We
September.
ruined her. We ruined her.
September.
I was gonna say you guys, you made her life better.
Yeah.
Say.
Jade, you are welcome.
Yeah,
ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah.
High fives all around.
I started the Marvel game with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that.
Do you remember your first Super?
Well, I'm
Oh,
still
absolutely.
on.
Yeah,
it.
we're still playing.
Oh, I was
I'm
like,
still. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I've only been with them just after Gen
you
Con
didn't
this
change
year.
your character?
No,
Not
you should
You know-
actually
you know
listen
what-
to this, Pete.
I'm
There's
like-
a lot of good stuff.
You know
with
how
it.
many
Yeah.
people make their first character and they go, I didn't want to make plants or like
Yeah.
Oh, no.
they randomly generate the powers and then
Yeah.
they just crap.
Mine
Oh, it's
generated like she's pretty amazing.
Yeah, sometimes it comes together
Like
really
it
tight.
came together quite perfectly.
But
So-
also, I'm a firm believer that character creation is a mini game that doesn't get enough
Sure, yeah.
credit.
Yeah.
You know.
I think
Just in
I enjoyed
general.
that just as much.
Yeah, and you ended up rocking it, and it dovetailed. She's like, well, I kind of want to do this, and I kind of want to do this, and everything fell right between the goalposts.
Yeah.
It was
So
really
like
nice.
my idea was like a hybrid between Rogue and Gambit. And I picked just the one thing, like one idea, and then the rest just kind of all fell into suit, and it was perfect.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, the dice gave some random elements, like ended up being magic instead
Yeah.
of a mutant.
Well,
Yeah.
that was
Scott,
fun.
you should talk to him though about the care gem because it's very interesting, unique what we try to do with that. He might enjoy that information.
So we tend to when we create characters for any of the games that we've run, and we've had a start. We did a Stargate SG-1. We did a fantasy game that's starting to wrap up. But both with the Marvel and even it was very funny because I think Star Trek Adventures mirrored a bit of that as well.
Star Trek
Correct.
Adventures has an excellent random character creation
And it
system.
brings you all the things.
For those
One-
red shirts, right?
Oh, and
that's
also
part
you
of it,
swap out
too.
and do them too.
So we do selective randomization. So we'll roll you twice on the chart and let you pick.
Oh, cool.
So you can go, okay, well, you have speak with plants or flight. And you're like, oh, I don't want to talk to plants. I would like to fly. And then we've got, ice generation and, camouflage. And you're going, I think I'll be a flying ice guy. And they let you. So you can either say, hey, I kind of want to go down this vein. Or we give you selective randomization. And if you love both of them, if you're like, oh, I've got ice generation and ice manipulation, I'll take both of them and slot them in as 2 and 3, but you don't get your choice on the third one. We just skip to number 4. So our selective randomization lets you say, okay, well, here's 2 choices. How are you going to maneuver the path of your character? She got some really interesting choices and that helped her a third or about halfway through, maybe 2/3 of the way through. She came up with a power that was magically generated. And it said, if you take this power, because we used the Ultimate Powers book way back in the day. And it said, if you take this power, all the rest of your powers, their source is magical.
Oh, cool.
Like you have, you can get flight next roll, but you fly through magic, not, you have to cast a spell to fly. Not, oh, I'm a mutant, I just get to fly. I'm Dark Angel, or I'm, whoever it is, I've got wings or whatever. No. All of your powers that you pick up from this point out are magic in ability. And we're done here. So it gave her a real magical bent so that when the guy at the end of the table who was playing the dragon, the sea creature that came out that was tied to the fairy, to the Fey realms.
It's very interesting.
She
I like
went.
that's your contribution continuously. Like, it's really good.
That's all I got.
You gotta see this. Yeah.
So he gets free and he's running from the Fae, and she goes, "Sure, why not? I'm magical." And then it went, down the rabbit hole from there, and it was pretty good all
Magically
the way around.
delicious.
But I mean, you don't want to be entirely, tethered to the dice roll.
Right.
Is the point.
Or you get robots that talk to plants.
Yeah,
That's their shtick. It is what it is.
yeah. I'm a robot that turns into a spider, and I talk to plants.
But I mean,
I'm not seeing it.
But they're killer plants.
I
so-
will never
it's-
want to become a spider.
No.
I would be afraid of myself.
Yeah.
It's funny. I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but it is funny how people pick and choose how to homebrew different parts of games.
Oh, absolutely.
Like where you draw the line, or do people? Some groups, they have to be fed up. They're like, I don't touch these rules unless we hate this, and then they probably don't play the game, right?
Right.
But some groups are just like, no. This is just a little too restrictive. Let's just chop this up right now. So it's also really refreshing because that's usually rule 0 in most RPGs, or at least the old ones, was always
Right.
like, hey, this is just kind of a guideline.
These
if
are
you like
optional.
the game.
Yeah.
If you're
'Cause,
having fun,
if you're actually, worrying about your encumbrance levels and what your Thaco does when you're wielding a glaive Guise arm versus chainmail.
Are you speaking English right now? I'm like,
Well, some of those words were English. But people who know what Thaco is will.
Your Thaco's at a minus.
John was saying the Queen's English, though, so the Brit that he is, so we wouldn't get half of it anyway.
Your Thaco's at a -3 the minute you touch that glaive.
whoa.
Okay, Thaco means to hit armor class 0.
and
It's
so
on
it
page
goes
73
lower.
of the blue book. Anyway,
I was going to say, do people remember the saving throw page
Oh
in
man,
second edition?
page 101. Yes.
So this is the material we're using late at night, huh? Okay.
oh, it is. Oh,
You took it there. What is wrong with
you
you?
were bad. So the weird thing
Yeah,
that
save
ended
versus
up.
rods.
Wait, there's only one weird thing. We went down a lot of rabbit holes the last 10 minutes.
Well, but I was gonna comment on your. I had one. We had one. We finally got out of the dungeon, and I was with a group, and they were there, and everything was great, and they loved it, and they were like, "Oh, we got all this gold, and we did all those things," and I said, "Here comes a wandering magical band of caravans. You can buy anything you want," and we all remember that equipment page that had the spear kind of sideways in the weapons rack that had everything. And I went, you know what? Buy as much as you want. And literally they spent 3.5 hours going, we want 10 lengths of 50-foot rope, and we want 20 pole arms, and we want 10-foot poles. And they did the whole, and they bought as much as and they had a bunch of money left over. And I went, okay, great. Sure. And they said, all right. Oh yeah, it was. And they said it was one of the greatest adventures they had. And I went, well, you forgot about one thing. And they went, what? And I went, encumbrance. And they went,
How do you carry it all
How do you
home?
carry all that crap home? So then they're buying ponies
Yep.
and horses and stuff. And I'm
Carts,
like, what?
wagons.
Carts and wagons and stuff. So they go 6 miles down the road. The caravan whisks its way off, and they get into they see another opening to a dungeon, and they talk to this lady who lost her father down the hole. And the hole was like, you could fit a human-sized
Oh,
person
so
down.
they have to leave all their
So
stuff.
they had to leave all their gear. They went down
that's
like
boo.
4.
Boo, sir, boo.
They went down 4 rooms, found out there was a dragon in there, ran back, and the lady had made off with all the horses and the things. So then they, like you said, revenge became the thing. They kept chasing her down. But you're absolutely right. It was totally booable because I'm like, I'm going to give you 4 hours worth of math, just addition and subtraction.
You just built them up. You
Yeah.
built it up. It had its own resolution that led to a climax there, right? It was
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you're building it. They're like, finally, we have everything we ever wanted. And then you were like, and then this happens.
Yeah.
Hey, what's the story about? That's what it's about. Get
Yeah.
your shit back.
And I'm a firm
I like
believer.
it.
I'm a firm believer that everything on your sheet should be something you want to see happen in a game. It should be like a menu for the GM. One of the system's like rules aspects that I think was a system that didn't work, and it was in White Wolf's classic World of Darkness games. Flaws. Everybody
Oh,
would
geez.
take a whole bunch of flaws where they're like
Eerie presence.
where they have some where they have some penalty that may or may not come up to something they're bad at anyway, and then they hope to Batman that their GM or storyteller or whatnot will forget that it's on their sheet.
Your eyes are yellow.
Oh no! And so you end up with somebody who's like afraid of glaive guisarms and
bad hearing, can't cross running water, nightmares, overconfident,
Repelled by crosses.
repelled by crosses.
I always
garlic.
like allergies.
Yeah.
allergies.
Talk about
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there it is.
You're like, I'm allergic to bees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Suddenly
allergic to
Candyman
bees.
shows up.
I'm
you got a problem.
count allergic to bees.
Ta-da!
Awesome.
Hooray.
But yeah, and I mean, I think that that's an example of a system that, looking back didn't pay off.
Yeah.
It was a whole lot of work and a whole lot of messing around with points that that doesn't go anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
Especially in actual play. So that's the kind of stuff where coming into a game now, I look at games differently than I did when I was when I started on second edition D&D right as it came out and moved from there. In my opinion, everybody's second game after their first that they sort of move on to becomes like a their first, it's like your breakup and then you have a new relationship and it's the best thing ever. And you're like, oh, I'm so happy with my new girlfriend Torg.
So did you feel that about Star Trek? Because currently she's dating 2 people at the same time. I don't know if they know about each other.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't know.
They're about to.
Like I enjoy the Star Trek, but I liked Star Trek as a kid and I watched it. But you guys are like super in depth about it.
Oh, well,
so like I
yeah.
know like alien races and I know like the basic stuff, but then you start talking about things. I'm like, oh god, I have no idea.
Yeah, we try
So-
to streamline that as much as
And
we can.
I'm a fact person. I like to be as factual as possible. So I feel like
You
if
like to be right.
I like to be
and I get
right.
it.
I mean, so like I have a little more like fluidity with Lumen over Tassas because like Lumen is mine, where Tassas is Vulcan, and there are rules, there are things, and it's so I don't know. I think I'm still in love with Marvel. I enjoy my mistress of Star Trek.
Every now and then you want to
Every
cheat
now
on
and
Marvel
then.
with Star Trek.
Yeah.
All right, well, good for
Well,
you.
And it's also interesting that as Face Rip Marvel came out in what 83.
Oh God, it's older than me.
And so I mean that's up there with the oldest games. I mean, you not exactly the very first
Yeah.
games,
Right.
but I mean,
Yeah.
certainly one of the earliest licenses.
TSR had a license on it.
Right.
And there was
And so, I mean, yeah, and like Star Trek Adventures came out last year, so it's an interesting thing to see those two extreme ends of where we've gone
Of the spectrum.
and where we've been. Yeah.
A question about Star Trek. Did it have flaws?
It has basically it doesn't have really explicit flaws. Your species becomes one trait. And so anything that affects your species when that comes up, it's just one modifier.
Okay.
So it doesn't explicitly have any kind of flaw system, but you can roll up an entire Starfleet officer with an outstanding career that they've gone through, and you might end up having. Like there are random career events where you might have discovered a new species or fought in a war or whatever, and one of them is something that might be. Some of them are things that could be flaws, like you could you called out a superior, and you might have been court-martialed for it, and so but you come out of it with skills like. A uniform code of conduct for Starfleet.
Yeah.
As
You know the
as sort of
uniform
like
justice code left and right.
right, because you were, you had an entire episode where you were speaking in your defense for, for calling out your captain.
Your captain for being a genocidal maniac.
Yay!
And so,
Star Trek Discovery.
And so,
Oh,
What?
What?
oh,
I love Lorca. You leave him alone.
yeah, Lorca.
He has had a rough life.
I love
okay?
Scotch. Lorca. Yeah, Lorca. I
Oh,
love
well-
Lorca. I love him.
But anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it sort of turns those flaws or things that go badly into a positive.
I was just curious because we ended up talking about a lot of games that are from the 80s and then
Right.
maybe in the 90s with the most of the White Wolf stuff, and it just got me thinking that I just remember, and it may be because I played more of the traditional role playing games back in the 90s when I got started. I was playing Shadowrun, Rifts, D&D, all of the sort of flagship names of the time, and they all had a very similar structure. That was kind of like stat plus skill in some way, other than D&D, and then usually it was like hit the merits and flaws, Deadlands, all these games, and it was very like that was the trend, the theme almost.
yeah.
Like, how do you make a character? This is the flow. Just every game switched it up a bit. But it's neat with the explosion of like the indie games of like the 2000s that I was trying to figure in my head, is it where my head's at in the gaming sphere, or is it the gaming trend of just today where I was thinking, I was like, I just don't remember every game being like, cool, now it's almost at the end. Point by one has faded a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the rules light explosion, right? And then I was thinking traits, like you said, a lot of games have things that could be positive or negative depending on the situation, and maybe that's where we've kind of gone in the current space.
Yeah,
I
like
don't see so much
fates-
like, here's
fates
3
aspects.
points, I have allergies,
Yeah.
or a -1 modifier with bees around or something.
In order to afford my ability to climb and also pay rent, I need to be afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
And also a chummy cannibal.
I was thinking like Shadows of Estrin's probably the most recent newer game, and that's not new by any means, but like that I felt still kind of had that flow. The character sheet even is a little reminiscent. Now they have that cool domain thing that they have, but when I think about like kind of the trends, because especially in role playing games, when we talk about it's the generations, because every 10 years there's the cycle. There is a cycle
absolutely.
that's going on, and we're waiting right now for when technology catches up, and when we don't need rules light because our phones are going to do all the math and the physics for
Right.
us.
Yes.
We're
We
not
hate
there
math.
yet, but any day that's going to like revolutionize what our gaming is like today. And until then, we're in this like rules light space when it comes to role playing games.
Right. I found that very few of the gamers that I play with these days are able to either they're willing to do a crunchy system, a rules heavy system because of nostalgia, and they've already they learned it when their brains were still soft, malleable, and they're willing to go back to it, or they just can't be arsed to
Can't be bothered.
try another game.
Have you found people though? I get this a lot because of my old core group of people. Those people are all like, "Where are all the meaty games with the thick setting?" Because they miss Shadowrun, they miss L5R, where there was like splat books and source material. But it's funny because I'm like, guys, they're not around because the money. They just don't make the money they used to. I mean, the number of sales is just I'm trying to think like in denominations lower, like multiplier lower. I mean, there was time obviously in the '80s when we were selling millions. We're selling hundreds of thousands routinely, and then that came to like tens of thousands. And now we're in the modern era where it's like, like the best games are in the tens of thousands. I mean, other than maybe D&D, but
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, like, I'm pretty sure I could actually build a real robot easier than I could make one with, say, GURPS, using the
riffs.
GURPS
No, you
robot
could-
supplement.
It would take 10 hours, but you could do it.
Using the
It'd be
old
amazing.
Palladium Robotech system.
I was in California for a convention called Strategicon. It's actually the banner name. They have 3 throughout the year. They do them every year. And I think it was Gateway because it was right around the September holiday. Is that Labor Day? Or I always mix those two up. Memorial Day and Labor Day. I'm so bad with that. But I went out there and I took Dream Chaser. And, part of the appeal is that, for a lot of people it is like, hey, this game can be whatever you want it to be. And they're like, oh, like GURPS. This was like 6 months ago. And I was like, what? And it was, the first time, the second time, the third time. But it just kept happening. And what was crazy is I found that, like, especially Southern California, huge GURPS, like stalwart fortress, like of fans audience. Like I don't know if that's like one of the places they hit hard, like in the 80s, and then just like kind of like it's always lived on. But they have a strong GURPS culture, and I was like, what? I mean, because like Riffs and Palladium, we see some of that up north, especially because we're close.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, GURPS. Like you're laughing about, we a couple of these guys are picking at it, but for good reason because we're just like no one plays that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
nobody.
the
Not
physics.
anymore. Come on
even
now.
the guys I used to game with who were like, they all went straight to GURPS from Second Ed, I think. Second Ed D&D in the 90s. And or in the 89 thereabouts when Third Ed came out. Third Ed of GURPS. And they left out a considerable chunk. They ran like a lighter version of GURPS.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, you never know how many I've heard them called lost tribes, where they're playing like the same characters that they had when they were 11, that have jumped from system to system, and they are playing like some heavily house ruled version of like a Second Ed D&D campaign. They're
Hero system, GURPS, that all lets you. I'm gonna put my magic missile is the same as a laser bolt is the same as it's the same mechanics. Now I just flavor text it.
Yeah.
And we're all good here.
Savage Worlds is great. That's to me that was the game that first said like, hey, it's just a skin.
Yeah.
It's all the same mechanically, right?
I couldn't get the math to work in my favor for Savage Worlds. I liked it, but
the
define
D4 is too powerful.
Define works.
Define in your favor.
Okay, let's put it this way. If I wanted to run a Star Wars game, Star Wars style game, at no point in any of the Star Wars sagas does Luke Skywalker get shot in the lung and have to by a random guy and have to spend like
Random
3 weeks in the hospital.
Yeah.
What did you do with your bennies?
Well, I mean, you see, the thing is,
Played it all wrong.
you see, like the thing is that like the fact that the roles were all open ended meant that you that like you had a pretty good chance of just any random
Dwarf with a 38.
Yep.
it could do like it's really fun when the players crit. Get they ace a bunch of times and get a really huge roll.
Luke Skywalker dies of infection. Who would have thought?
Yeah, but sometimes they just some random random like flight attendant throws a peanut and hits somebody in the eye and they just explode.
But then the allergy kicks in, and we're all screwed. It's true.
They shouldn't
You
have
guys
taken
keep
that.
going back to
they shouldn't have
allergies.
taken that
Bees,
flaw.
peanuts.
It was a
like-
great point. I'm just
No,
trying to pay
it's not my
homage.
fault.
They shouldn't have taken that flaw.
Yeah.
We're being ableist
So
now.
I'm going to segue. I want to know more about Dream Chaser.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, how does Dream Chaser deal with all of these?
Because I don't know about any of this stuff they're talking about.
Sure.
So I want to get involved again. I want to know about Dream Chaser.
Yeah.
All right. So, how does it
So-
deal with things like character creation and setting out and what you want to do with the game?
How do you learn about us? That's
So-
what I don't understand.
The beautiful thing is that, so the first thing it does is we try to come up with what the game is about. What is the story we want to be a part of? So what we do is we hand out index cards and we ask everyone to write a short sentence that has a goal in mind. And they come up with things like maybe, I have this little handy dandy cheat sheet right here, like maybe they want to conjure the greatest spell ever. Maybe somebody says, I want to convince a fairy queen. We don't know yet of what. But the cool thing is these ideas, once spit out there and we're all paying attention, thinking about it, will start to make some of us wonder. Might even make some of us laugh. Or to get us to go, what the hell is a tulpa? I don't know what that word is. Oh, okay. So it's like this kind of golem thing that like artists kind of pour their soul into and they don't know when they craft something they're very passionate about. Before you know it, we're playing that game because we all talked about it for 20 minutes. But, you know, the beauty of the game is sometimes it catches all the niche games there isn't something for, like Eat the McRib again. Somebody was like, I don't know, what can this game do? Make the perfect sandwich? But what's neat is with that premise, we all start to brainstorm where this could go and who we want to be. So everyone gets a couple ideas. We vote. The players vote. The GM has no say in what the goal of the story is.
Uh-oh.
And then as soon as they come to basically an idea of what the vote is tallied up, right? We then make characters with the goal in mind. Because that's the large argument of Dream Chaser in a lot of ways is that the goal is very precise. If you all know that this is a dungeon crawl, somebody's not going to make the bard who's trying to start a lemonade stand. Somebody's not going to be the greatest urban pickpocket ever and then be stuck in a dungeon and go, well, of course I'm going to pickpocket the players. I made this character
course
do
I am.
that. like where
Looking
was
at
the
you,
disconnect?
Jackson.
You know.
No, I didn't do it.
So
You just seem like the dude.
Yeah,
You seem like the
I would.
dude.
It leads to great story, though.
I mean, he's the one who brings a dragon to a Marvel fight.
And you loved it.
I do love
Well,
it.
he's got the helm of of raising the armies,
Yeah.
and he finds out, well, none of my party's dead, so I should probably kill some of them, see if I can bring them back to life. Go ahead, carry on.
They already look sleepy. Don't blame me.
Yeah.
Just
So
saying.
the big part is that there's a little compromise in that you build the box of what is the game about.
Okay.
Because you say, I want to bring back Firefly for more episodes. And then somebody goes, well, then shit, you know, I'm Mal. And then somebody goes, well, I'm the agent. I'm Mal's real life agent. What's the actor's name?
Nathan
Nathan
Fillion.
Fillion.
Yeah, I'm
Fillion.
Nathan Fillion's real agent. And we all start kind of like playing off of one another, just like a good GM would, right? And we make characters with the goal in mind, and then we make sure that the build-up of the story is structured in pieces, kind of like chapters, and each one of them is a character goal. It's something that one player said either they wanted an experience with their character to have in the game, or they wanted to see in this story. Like maybe you just felt like a ski chase today, or we should all be zero diving from some sort of a bomber plane, and that's what your mood was. Or exactly, maybe you wanted to be Nathan Fillion, and you wanted to play Mal again, and maybe there's some other actor they were replacing you with.
And have another character in there who's like the evil Fox executive who's trying to stop it from happening.
And what's really neat is because we kind of organically piece this together, the idea is a lot like the novelist's approach to like a book. Don't say that the main character has 5 brothers till you need to. Otherwise, later you're going to explain where the 5 brothers are and what they've been doing for the last 5 years.
Right.
So we don't worry about the setting. We let you build in this void so that it's not like, oh, well, cool, I would be this character, but wait, oh, I'm sorry, that's too futuristic. It doesn't fit here. Because that's where players get exhausted. When you give them a box to fit things into, they keep throwing things at it and going, that doesn't quite work. This doesn't work. This game is trying to empower your creativity.
So
That sounds fantastic.
So question, Pete. So with this concept, awesome concept, by
Thanks.
the way, did you start with this, or was there a difficult roadmap to getting?
Oh, of course,
to,
yeah, right.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I'd love to know
Sure.
the road, the journey, what it took to get to here,
Sure.
the different incarnations, because I think it's an awesome concept.
What's really, really so. I'll throw a couple tidbits and then I'll shut up because in that case also I don't want to go down these tangents too long.
No, it's all about you, brother.
Sure. But one of the things, we call it Dream Chaser, a game of destiny, because one of the places it started in was this word destiny, right? Destiny's a sexy word.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone likes fate. They like destiny. They like the idea that we have some sort of like prophetic future that is something meaningful to our lives.
The
'Cause
hero's journey.
We all want to say that we have a meaning to our existence, right?
We want to be the hero.
We want to have free will too, which is
Human
kind of weird.
nature.
but-
I don't want to be the hero. I'm the bad guy in my own story.
Oh.
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 All right. Well, we'll help with that.
Tragic
What?
hero.
I
Be
don't-
the hero. You are the hero.
No.
All right.
But I found that destiny was actually, it's like perfection. It's a little daunting. So
A little.
Dream Chaser came out of that term that we're trying to chase after the experiences we want as players. I want you. One of the reasons we role play is we have something we want to get out of it, whether it's escaping or these experiences we want to live through vicariously or these people we want to become for a short time. So I tried to make a game that said, how do I capture that? Well, if you want to become world champion and you love boxing, or if you want to, just become the greatest snowboarder, or if you want to write a New York Times bestseller, great. We can do that in Dream Chaser. If you want to save the princess, if you want to stop Bowser, if you want to fly the Millennium Falcon, we can do that in Dream
Yeah.
Chaser. So it's also about having the little game that can,
Okay.
in a package that is not daunting. Because, we here have talked about games from the 80s. We're the people who don't mind seeing a 400-page manual. I mean, we might be like, oh, man, but we're going to read and be kind of excited. But we are shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to the general public. And
Sure.
today's audience is getting new people. We talked about this a little beforehand, but the learning curve, I have a 6x9 book. It's some people have read it in one day and run it the same evening. Now, that's not everybody. Most of you probably going to spend a week kind of like flip through the pages, but it's beautiful. It's full color. It's got 37 images for 110 pages. And there's a couple pages at a glance that will give you like a board game feel of like, hey, how do I do this again? Cool, one page that just walks me through simple. That's what I needed, thank you. But I wanted something that brings people back to the table, whether they have busy schedules or whether they've walked away because they feel like they don't have time for role-playing games anymore. But also a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot by being like, hey, come play D&D. It's every Wednesday. Well, for how long?
Ever.
Ever. Right?
Ever.
This game always becomes finite because it's goal-oriented. Sometimes players go, hey, GMs are stressed about players because they're like, why are they on their phones? What are they doing? Are they even having fun? Are they interested? Cool. This game asks them, what do they want? How do they want to get it? And, who do they want to be with kind of thing? And gives them that experience. Then says, all right, cool, I will run this game for you. So it's got player investment and buy-in all over the place.
Which is really hard to get, and I keep having to pay for the bills when I cut off the hands of the people that
Yeah.
are using the phones. So,
Scheduling, pacing, these are like the
yeah.
current GM issues, right? Getting
Nice.
character buy-in. So what I like to think is you get an immersive character, something that's ready. It's not Carl the fighter that I need 2 meetings to kind of feel out.
Carl.
Yeah.
Carl the fighter, your
Yeah.
favorite fighter of all time.
Of
We've
all
used
time.
Carl as a generic
Oh,
name
okay,
quite
yeah.
a bit, so that actually
yeah.
plays very well into
Yeah.
a running joke.
Yeah.
But just a segue back on Josh, what you mentioned was that it was funny is the game itself started with. So I was finishing the Dresden File series.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Very nice.
I've been catching up on those for like the last couple years or something, and I was really into this like sense of will. Like infusing your magic, pushing your sort of will on the future of what you want. And the working title for this game at the time was called Gaps. And the tagline was kind of like to conquer the space between. I was kind of channeling this thing that was kind of like Dark Sun-esque, where Dark Sun had these, the magic was powered by the land, like their surroundings. Like, I forgot what the names were, but the ones they basically killed everything around them.
Defiler wizards and preservers.
And the preservers, yeah. So I like the idea of like having different approaches that maybe your powers, you could influence people like in a sort of charm aspect or manipulation, but maybe it was by having like strong like confidence or social circles or people to boost you up and you kind of gathered your energy and they could use it in that way. Or some people, maybe their powers were limited by the literal space. Like, so just different like a different approach to magic. But I didn't want it to be so much like Flash as much as like more the Matrix. Like people could break the world
Sure.
by having these sort of abilities
Nice.
that were defined in their own viewpoints.
Or like,
So-
you'll never talk, the city government into using all the money that they're using to buy new shotguns for the cops to spend that on books for the children. That's
No,
silly. And
stop it.
And then you just sort of like,
shift them over.
Shift it over. I get it.
But the best point is, with Josh asking that, the interesting part about any game is it's kind of, at least for me, as someone who's like kind of passionate, Tony Robbins said this thing that was great. He was like, people always ask Tony Robbins, the famous like speaker and positive guy.
Motivational speaking
yeah.
guy.
They always ask him, he's like, how do I get to be a good speaker? How do I like give great presentations? And his line is always like,
speaking.
Don't talk about shit you don't care about.
Yeah.
Because he's like, that's just straight up. If you care about it, it will be passionate and people will be in it.
And they'll tell just from when you go, oh, which one? The face rip? When you said the one from the 80s, the face rip? And then it was like you light up and you're talking about things you love.
Yeah.
It's if you're passionate about it, if you have the investment. And that's always a tough thing to do is get character investment, which with a system that says you ask the players, what do you want to play?
Yeah.
I want to do this. And then you go, all right, let's go do that. And it's you have an immediate investment, immediate buy-in. You're not going to lose people in the, well, I'm the pilot of the ship. All right, you're flying through the asteroid field. What do I do now? Like, wait, how did you get bored? You asked to do this.
This is your story.
Yeah, this is your story.
Well, and the thing is that part of the problem is that when I say I want to be the pilot, that might mean something very different to the if I just like leave that out. Like I might be thinking Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica, and he might be thinking Wash from Firefly, and it is an entire different experience.
No, I was thinking the pilot of that ship. What was it? What was the one? Iceberg. Dead ahead. Oh, that's the one. Oh.
But I mean, but in my experience, a lot of what gamers as players like is we like the idea of Destiny, like of the stuff that we want will show up in the game.
Yeah.
And we want, but we
Control.
want the characters to have like freedom within that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because one of the greatest things about the game is sometimes seeing what happens with the matter of like. So my favorite example is like we watch trailers for movies all the time.
Yeah.
Like obviously the Infinity War trailer is everywhere, and you see all this stuff that makes you go, "Oh, that looks so cool," or "This looks really cool." I saw Ready Player One yesterday, and
Was it
and
good?
I'm not going to say it. Obviously,
Have you read
spoilers
the
for-
book?
No, my
Okay.
wife did. She was not happy because of that.
See, that's what I'm curious about. I read the book and I love the book.
How about like it's from what I gathered from her, if they basically said, okay, well the important stuff, cool, those are still the goal, but we're going to change everything about how they happen.
a lot of the trailers, the visuals, and the things that I'm like, that's what? What is that?
Like you mentioned the keys, for example.
Yeah.
Think of everything they did for the keys, 100% replaced with something else.
Shut up.
And I was blown away listening to her talk about it because I was like,
How did you get from here to there?
well, why do you buy a property like that and then gut it?
And
That's
then
the whole point of
change it.
Hollywood.
No, and
it's
Hollywood
so-
buys a property with a
It's
following.
the book is so great,
so
and
you
the
can build it up
yeah.
and make it for the big screen, not gut it.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and I could picture that while I was reading that, I could picture this one as a movie.
As a person who didn't read the book, though, loved it.
yeah, and I go
did hear
into
lower rate. People have been saying like 7.5, but I think those are people who have read the book.
Who were disappointed.
Disappointed.
They had
Yeah.
expectations.
I had no expectations, and when I hear a lower number like that, I was like, "Oh, okay, what's going to be like an 8?" And then I went to see it. Because of that, I was like, "Dude, this is like a 9.5." I mean, there's some story holes and plot
Sure.
holes and character.
Yeah.
I asked her a couple questions, like, "What was the deal with that guy? And where did that person come from?" But
See, at least you have somebody.
I enjoyed it,
and I
yeah.
felt that way about the first Hunger Games movie. If you didn't read the
Oh.
book, you have no idea what's going on.
Yep,
Yeah.
correct.
Like, because it's so
Yeah.
much internal thought for Katniss,
Yeah.
and they don't do that in the movie. And it's like, if I hadn't read this, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I always go into a movie that's from a book I've read with an open mind, as
Sure.
they got content and it's an adaptation.
This is like, especially for today's day and age, where like we always blame cinema for not being bold enough.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy from what I could tell, because I
Well-
was asking her like, "Well, did this happen?" No, not at all. None of that. This
Like,
is
I
what
saw
happened.
a
I was
trailer
like,
last
well,
night
why
where,
didn't they
like,
do that? Nope, that
Batman
that was
is
totally
scaling
new.
a mountain, and I'm like, what is that even? What is that? Okay,
Yeah.
no, yeah.
That's
So,
phenomenal.
Hopefully, people hearing that, I'm just lowering your expectations a little bit, so you enjoy it as much as I did.
Nice.
Now,
Fair,
how many times did you run into? So was this a thing? Rant mode on, where it was no, it was completely different.
Like I said, it was a lot, especially for modern cinema. I was really surprised. I
Okay.
mean, plenty of things are based on true stories anymore or something. And it'll be like, okay, it was 20%, factual or something. But the general premise was pretty much the same. This was like, I'm like, this is a fantasy, like it's a total fictional thing. And it sounds like they hit all the key points, but in none of the ways that you normally do.
Huh.
And
Okay.
like, it's some of the choices. Anyway, it's good.
It's good. All right.
Yeah, I saw. It looked like they integrated a lot of '90s stuff,
Which is really funny. I'm
and
sure
the book is '80s.
Yeah, I'm sure. I asked her about that too, which is funny you mentioned that because I thought the same thing. I think they just were trying to broaden the nostalgia of the movie
Right.
into not their whole audience is going to embrace the '80s. So there's a lot of '80s.
Embrace the
Almost as much
millennials.
'90s.
Yeah.
Almost as much early 2000s. But the funny thing that she mentioned that I was like, that is really weird. They're supposed to be in 2045.
Yeah.
And what did pop culture end at 2010? Because there was the book, I guess, from 2011, and there was no talk of anything that was pop
Right,
culture after
and that's
that.
the book is '80s with a pinch of '90s
Yeah.
here and there, so there wasn't that continuity issue. The guy was literally he was a kid in the '80s. He started his path in pop culture
Yeah.
through D&D, and he was kind of awkward. And it was all
They made him
80s.
extra awkward too. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm a little bit
I was like,
leery.
It's
did they have to nerd him out more than he was? I thought it was a little overdone, but
It was, yeah.
it's funny because Scott and I both grew up in the '80s. And
sure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were-
we're alive in the
was
'80s.
made-
and
there you go.
I was
remember
made in the
things.
80s.
You guys were in college, right?
They were inventing the wheel.
I graduated in 1990. You shut up.
You said 1990. Oh, okay, I got you. Keep going.
So we were
riveting stuff.
So we were riding around on our Dimitrodons,
Right.
but I mean, at the time, the pop culture nostalgia kick was for the 50s and 60s. Yeah. The previous generation saturated pop culture with it, wouldn't shut up about it, and now our generation is has an even bigger desire to foist that off on the next one, and so I feel like there's kind of a little. I feel a little bit of fatigue seeing Ready Player One after they've brought back Ninja Turtles just in regular Hollywood for the
Which
umpteenth
one?
time.
Which
Yeah,
ninja?
you be quiet, you.
All the cameos are just for cameo purposes.
little
I got you.
call
They're
outs
just there
and
because they
things.
can.
They're Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, maybe we saw more 90s stuff because, you got to think, they're going to pull that from other media instead of, remaster it, right? So it had to be more of the 90s because a lot of it was already prepared. They just could doctor it up a little bit. But a lot of the stuff, there's probably not, well, I don't know. I guess I'm not enough of a techie to really know. But, I mean, think about what you'd have to rip up and clean up from the 80s.
Right.
Technology
Oh, yeah.
levels, yeah.
Well, I mean, it would be kind of difficult to have the entire A-team show up, and,
Exactly, yeah.
And also you start to run into stuff that becomes a little bit peripheral. It's who shot JR? It's well, I mean,
yeah. Well, the Halo crew, they can pretty much
Spoilers.
pull that right off the video game and put it right into the,
Yep.
the
That's
big
true,
screen
yeah.
instead of the A-team where they'd have to redigital the actual people or something.
Right.
See, I feel like it sounds like there's a whole lot more cameo junk in it than there was in the book.
But it wasn't meat. It was
Yeah.
just in the background.
Yeah.
I did not
But
feel
even,
it didn't take center stage.
The 80s stuff,
Yeah.
even in the book, was very minimal. It was about the
Yeah.
characters and then his calling of the knowledge of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, the whole first part of the book is about D&D.
Now, you see, and that unfortunately there was zero D&D.
Really?
There was
What?
one
I don't even wanna
gratuitous,
go there.
D&D leads to Satanism. Come on, what's wrong
No,
with
that's
you?
upsetting because literally
They
the
made
first
memes in the 90s.
Said
I
the
remember.
Said the
I saw a
dragon.
couple of logos.
That's
and
it?
not to
dragon,
tell anybody, but the
not
avatar
B.
for the creator obviously seemed very D&D-esque.
Really?
So that was there. But yeah, a lot of it. There's
Yeah.
a couple here and there pieces, it's
that
mentioned,
was,
but it was not
Yeah, no,
important.
that was
Yeah.
the foundation of the millionaire or whatever.
It's too
What
bad.
he
Alright.
based the Oasis
Yes, yeah, it
Yeah.
was D&D and that was his
He
start.
might have had a line where he was like, "Oh, I played a lot of D&D as a kid," but
Yeah, no,
they
that's
made
kind
it
of
a little more
upsetting.
hey, it was about Atari. Video. They kept it more video
Well,
game
and I
oriented.
think the middle part there was an arcade game that he had to do, and
Yeah.
a lot of throwback to that
It's
stuff.
still.
But
It's a wonderful film to watch.
I
Yeah.
feel like they probably transitioned to the 90s because the core group who's going to go see it is
Yes.
our age range, and that's what we remember.
Yeah.
We may not necessarily remember those things from the 80s.
I felt they were just because the obviously selling point today with Stranger Things, like kick back to nostalgia and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, I was asking a lot of questions afterwards as a developer myself in different ways, or a content creator. I was very interested as soon as it was over. I was like, what year did this come out? How old is the author? Because I was interested in, like, obviously with Stranger Things and a lot of other things that are throwbacks, and even the internet allowing us to have more nostalgia. I was like, who is this guy? Because I want to get into his mindset of, like, who creates this? Because it's the brainchild of someone who loved the 80s, grew up in the 80s. And I was like, okay, and the guy, I think he was 46 or 47. So, no, he's 8 years, 45 probably. So when I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, well, I can kind of see it. Because, if that was my story, it would be a 90s version, right?
Right.
I grew up in the 80s, but I was just a little kid.
Right.
So, like, I just kind of saw it,
That's where I'm at. Like, the 90s is what
Yeah.
is nostalgic.
Yeah,
for
you
me.
start exactly. You mentioned
Power
Ninja
Rangers
Turtles,
and
MC
Ninja
Hammer,
Turtles
and Michael Jackson. I like the
Yeah.
And let me say this is I have no idea how we got here, but I like it.
I can the last thing I
No
will
idea.
say I will contribute at this moment is one of my favorite things in the book is there's a lot of Will Wheaton references.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Very minor. Like there's a planet like Wheaton, and like at one point he's an old man in it, and he actually did the audiobook, and it's the only audiobook I
nice.
have any interest in listening to because I kind of want to hear him say things about himself.
I'm glad you said that because I would like to listen. I like audiobooks, and
See,
I
I've
didn't even
never-
connect to that.
Yeah.
And you said that, and I was like, I should totally pick that up.
I've never done an
Yeah.
audiobook before, but I found out that after I finished reading the book, that
Yeah.
he did the audiobook, and I was like, there was like a handful of like mini references to him throughout.
Yeah.
I kind of want to hear him have to say these things about
Yeah,
himself.
that would be awesome. Yeah, I would.
So yeah.
I love
Fantastic.
audiobooks. I used to be for the commute back and forth for the day job, but I also travel a lot, and then especially the cons. Like this is 2 hours, nothing big, but there's a lot I do like in Ohio and Michigan and more of the further states.
Yep.
I'm trying not this year to go anywhere like Pennsylvania. Unless I'm flying.
Fair.
There was a couple of drives last year, the 10, 12 hours. I
And
was
by
like,
the way,
ooh,
boys and
yeah.
girls, nostalgia is Match Game 76.
What?
Okay. Anyhow.
Well,
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
that's
sorry.
10 years prior.
I said that before.
A little bit of Airwolf.
Yeah.
Love
Airwolf was the best,
Love
man.
Boat.
No,
That was Nick at Night when I was a
Legends
kid.
of the Golden Monkey.
Yes.
Party of two over here. No
Yeah.
idea what's going on. None.
See, you just cross like a few years back, and
Somebody
it's
crossed-
an entire other dialect of
I know.
of-
Yeah.
And you're
60s,
sick
you
of
know.
hearing, you're sick
Don't
and tired of hearing about
cross
the
the
sock
streams.
hop
Yeah.
and the whole don't cross the stream. That's why Stranger Things, man. We watched Stranger Things. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
My wife was like, that was my hometown, 1983, right there. I lived on that street. I was just like, what? And it was perfect. I mean, it was
Yeah.
the perfect representation of 1983 in Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That show really owned me, like in the way that like my wife would pick on me all the time, especially I was like I think I was working on Dream Chaser when it came out, and she's like, hey, I can't get him to sit down for more than like a movie or a episode. I'm just not a binge person. I'm a very goal oriented, accomplished person. To my fault, right? Like I'm like I got to get some shit done, and then I can enjoy myself.
Yeah.
So she was like, she'd be looking at me like when the episode ended, like okay, you can go now, and I'm like. Just sitting there and let the timer go to the next episode. She was like, I don't know what's up with him. We watched 4 episodes
He's
in a row
broken.
yesterday. In 3 days we watched the series, but like
Nice.
for a lot of people,
See,
that's
I
nothing.
need to watch it. My
A lo-
roommate. Did,
What?
What
my
is
roommate-
wrong with you?
No, okay, so
Get out.
No, listen. To my defense, we started it.
No
And
defense for you.
Now
my-
you're just hurting
That's
it.
worse.
No,
you
I
started it and you didn't go anywhere.
He does not like 80s nostalgia anything. He's only like 2 years older than me.
So drop him like a sack of potatoes.
And when we watch TV, it's that last like hour or so before bed
Yeah.
after the kids have gone to bed.
Super tired. Yeah.
And so we both
Fading.
watch something that we both like, and so he wasn't a huge fan of it. So now I've got to like find that like time where
And you know I'm going
Whatever.
to make fun of him tonight.
I'm not.
Tonight.
Yeah, make fun
Whatever,
of this.
June Cleaver.
do you do
whatever.
the funny
June
thing?
Cleaver.
Are you always accusing each other of falling asleep?
No.
Okay.
Are you sleeping?
All right.
That needs
Yes.
to be,
You know
there needs to be a
what?
It's always
mini game
something
of
with me
that,
and my
right?
wife.
I take
Are you
that back.
sleeping?
Yes.
No, I'm
I
breathing.
will,
Stop
like,
it.
I will hear him because our couch is like
I'm not sleeping.
we're facing the TV and he's behind me.
You're
and I
sleeping.
will hear him start to snore and I'm like, "Are you sleeping?" No, I'm good. Okay, you sure?
Couples are the best for just. I don't know. That's a hot button funny issue. Is like because you always lie about it. No, I wasn't. I was paying attention.
or-
Me, I'm like, no,
Or I was sleeping. Thanks.
No, yeah, I'm totally like, yes, I was. Thanks.
Exactly.
No, right now we're binging Breaking Bad, and
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
yeah.
Was it hard at first?
Yes.
That first episode, I swear I watched it like 15 times.
So,
Like the first 10 minutes, I would always just like eyes glaze over, kind of slip. And I heard how good it was, but once you get 3 episodes in, the show.
See,
was
that's
the
how I
greatest.
felt about
Like,
Game of Thrones. The first episode, I was
Oh.
like, did I just get dropped into something? Like, did I miss episodes? And my friend was like, no, just stick with it. And I did, and I'm addicted.
It's like Supernatural for me. It was the same thing. First couple seasons were bad. Straight after that, though,
no,
Scott
see,
Troiano.
the third
great.
season was like, for
Hey,
me.
everybody's got an opinion. I know yours is wrong, but regardless, it's
Hey.
great.
You get 24 hours in, and it's pretty good.
See? So really, what I'm saying is, don't be a quitter. That's all I'm saying.
No, I'm not. No.
Good.
All right.
I'm not.
Okay. I'm
Okay,
gonna.
so
I'm gonna
back
wrap.
to-
I'm gonna wrap this
Yeah,
all back
sure,
up.
yeah.
I'm gonna bring
We're
this
going-
all back to Dream.
We've gone off the rails.
I
we
got this
apologize.
box. If you want to nicely put it all back
Yeah,
in
I'm
for me.
gonna. It's like Pandora's. You need 4 episodes of Gaming with Thrones. Start Supernatural at season 3, episode 1.
No, I liked 1 and 2.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
Moving on. No, I'm just kidding. So we all need to find how
Bring
to
it
work
back to
together. What
Pete
all of
so
our
he doesn't have to
goals
listen
are.
to
What are our goals?
Because Pete
Watch Stranger
Petrusha.
Things.
No, Petrusha.
Patricia. You know why I put a K in
You
there?
got ambitious.
You know why I put
I'm
a
gonna
K in
knock
there?
you down.
You know why I put a K in there? Because in the Slavic languages, K means bad. Like I knew this lady by the name of
Did
Natasha.
you just call him bad?
I
Why-
know.
Yes, I'm getting there. Can I get to the? Can
yes,
I get
get
to
there.
insulting our guest
jump
faster,
on it.
please?
His
Get
mother,
him, he's
being interrupted.
bleeding.
his mother's a nice lady. I can't believe you did that.
So Petrusha.
Yeah.
Thank
See?
you. Jeez.
So when they put the K in, whenever she got scolded, it was Natashka. And then she knew, her mom was like, oh, her Russian mother was like, oh, this is going to be bad. Like, voda is water.
Yeah.
Vodka with a K, evil water. Oh,
Oh.
so Petrushka.
I like that. Yeah.
Apparently.
Because I'm
think
getting a
Churchill-
feel that I'm going to love this game and I really want to play it.
What I
and-
love about that, right, is we just learned that if you go, you can make anything better.
Yeah. We're just going to.
I don't even know what the noise was. But
Big
suddenly everyone's like,
trouble
yeah,
from-
he's not bleeding anymore. We like him again.
Big trouble for Moose and Squirrel.
I was trying. I was like, is that spelled wrong? There's a K in there. There's got to be, right?
See,
This
I-
is Russian, isn't it?
I knew how to
No.
say it, but I don't know if you realize you and I are friends on Facebook.
I after you said Jade, and then I thought about it a second. I'm like, I bet. I just didn't know you were on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a baby on the podcast.
Did we just
I'm
become
a-
best friends? That's what I heard.
Yes.
I think we
But yeah,
did.
so I knew how to say it because I've seen it. And
Yeah.
since HoosierCon last year.
Say it again.
Petrusha.
Go ahead, say it.
Petrusha.
Petrusha.
He's not. He's
John,
not. He's
you're not
not
even trying.
He's not evil Pete. He's Pete.
Pete Petrusha.
You see,
His name is.
I don't know. Were you worried because you were like Petrusha?
His name is Peter
Enunciated.
Petrushka.
That's his ego.
some emphasis
his
in it.
alter ego.
Is that it? Peter
For
Petrushka.
Moose and Squirrel.
So let's
There-
go.
there's-
We're going to play. Where can we find you?
So
What's your-
imagininggames.com.
ImaginingGames.com.
There's at Imagining Games on Facebook. We have a Dream Chaser RPG on Facebook. We're on Discord.
Twitters?
My
Ooh, you're
Twi-
on Discord?
Yeah. If you go to the Facebook pages, you'll see the pinned link for that. But my Twitter and my G Plus are mostly me. Because
M-E, is that how we spell that? Or is that
Capital M.
Petrushka with a K?
It's
I got
Japanese.
it.
It's
Okay.
M-I.
on Twitter I'm at Vembranor, VEMBRANOR. But largely the stuff you can find also through Imagining Games. All the social links are there. So.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Actually, imagininggames.com.
Yep.
Awesome.
Not Imaging Games.
No, not imaging.
No.
Imagining
It's like people
Games.
forget how to spell when you put it in front of them. They're like Imaging Games. I need a new check, please.
Yeah. Oh, he's getting checks. How do we, Pete? We're gonna get off the air here and we're gonna talk about how I get checks because I've never had that happen yet as a person. So you are so far ahead of the rest of us in this whole game thing.
Hashtag good problems.
Yes. Hashtag problems I wish we had.
Amen.
Well, Pete, I hope you had fun. We had fun talking to you. We're
Good
gonna
times.
take a little break.
Talk
and
about
then
memory lane here.
right? Isn't it great?
Crazy.
Now I don't feel old at
We
all.
talked about childhood.
Yes, we did.
Now we're old friends.
Now we're old friends.
Yeah.
No, we're going to take a little bit of time. We're going to play. We're going to drop another episode with that. Pete, it was glad to have you. I was glad to have you on. I think it was a good episode.
Absolutely.
Thank
I
you, gang.
can't wait to see. We're at HoosierCon 10. We have a now more packed audience. Hello, audience. That's okay.
Hello.
It's a wonderful. We got an audience since we started. It was amazing. It was brilliant. So we're going to take 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to set up the game, and then we will be back with Pete and Imagining Games.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon.
Bye.
Ciao, ragazzi.